this morning. My name is Chris Chandler here at Grey Matter, and I am the services team leader. I'd like to thank you all for your time in joining us for this Parallels webinar, covering how you reinvent the way in which you deliver your applications using the Parallel RAS platform. Just in terms of a bit of housekeeping, if you've got any questions, do feel free to pop them into the Q&A window. We will attempt to address them as they come in, but we will have a Q&A at the end of today's session. So please, we will run through those at the end. The webinar is being recorded, and we will share copies of the recording with you following, and also copies of the slide deck, so you've got those as well. So just to briefly, for those of you that aren't aware who Grey Matter are and what we can do, we have been running for well over 30 years now as providing software to customers such as yourselves and solutions in and around that. Predominantly, well, the business originally was focused very much on ISVs and those that were making software applications and providing them to customers. Now it's a much broader stroke in terms of who we work with. So as you can see on the screen there, the verticals in which we span are quite significant. The business itself has 100+ employees. It feels like at the moment we've got a new person starting every day. I think we must be in about the 110 mark across the group of companies. So yeah, very expanding rather quickly at the moment to ensure that we're providing the best possible services to our customers and solutions, and the best level of customer service in and around that as well. In terms of capability, so you can see on screen there, we are Microsoft certified. We have gold competencies and silver competencies, so that demonstrates that not only are we capable in terms of certification, so my team more specifically, are certified from a technical perspective in terms of the Microsoft solutions that we deliver, but also as part of our submission to be awarded those competencies, it relies on customer case studies as well. So we've got, not only are we technically able to deliver, but we've got customer case studies that back up our ability to deliver those solutions. From a Parallels perspective, it's worth noting that my team is technically trained on the Parallels RAS platform to the point where we are a premier partner with Parallels, one of very few in the UK. Adding to that as well, we are the only service provider license agreement partner for Parallels within the UK as well, so it makes us very unique in terms of our offering in and around the Parallels solution. So just touching on services and how we can help you beyond just simply licensing, more specifically around the Parallels piece, but if we consider in general, as you can see on the screen there, solution design. So not only are we able to do the deployments, but we'll obviously help in the design of the solution based upon your specific requirements. So whether you want to deploy in the cloud, whether you want to deploy on a third-party hosted data center, or even your own infrastructure, we can help in the design of that. And then moving into the migration implementation of that. So we'll take the design and actually perform the deployment of the Parallels platform, again, wherever that might be. Specifically looking at cloud, so should you be looking to deploy Parallels within the cloud, we can provide hybrid integration in and around that. So taking your cloud platform and integrate it with your on-premise infrastructure or third-party hosted data center, depending on where your infrastructure lies. Moving on from that, we touch on recovery services. So that's very much in and around the backup and disaster recovery offering. So ensuring that your service is always on and always available should in the event of a disaster happening or you need to recover something, we've got those recovery services in place. Backing all that up in terms of services, we have a service desk which can be available up to 365 days a year, 24/7. Should you need that, that can have up to an hour SLA should it be required. But we certainly, in terms of what we do, we provide the support in and around all the solutions that we provide our customers. And then just in terms of your own enablement, we can provide the training to back that up as well. So if you'd like to learn more about the solutions that you're implementing from a technical level and an administration level, we can provide that. But also when it comes to end user training, so enabling your users to use the solutions that you implement, we can provide that to ensure that your project goes as smoothly as possible. At this point, I appreciate that you're all on the call today to learn about Parallels RAS and all the wonderful things that you can do for your business. So I'd like to hand over to Christian from Parallels, who will deliver the main content this morning.
Hello, everyone. Great. So thank you, Chris, for that, and welcome to today's session. My name is Christian Acolina, and I lead the sales engineering team in EMEA on remote application server. And for the rest of the slide deck today, what we'll be looking at is Parallels introductions for those of you who are not yet familiar with Parallels, and also obviously focusing on remote application server. And then towards the second part, we'll be looking at a live demo. So we'll see all this functionality that we're going to discuss today in action. This will also be followed by a Q&A session. So if you do have any queries, please make sure that you put forward these queries in the Q&A and chat box, and we'll make sure that we'll take this after the call today. So to start off with, Parallels has been considered as a cross-platform leader in solutions, and this is because obviously looking at this slide here, we're seeing the Parallels portfolio here, starting from the first one on the left-hand side, Parallels Desktop, and actually what put Parallels in the map is Parallels Desktop for Mac. So the idea here was to have these Windows applications and desktops available on the Mac device in like an offline manner. Then Parallels also invested in Parallels Mac management, so have the ability to manage and secure Macs in organizations where SCCM is available. So we're extending that SCCM capabilities so the IT administrators can also manage and secure Macs in their environment. And what we have there in the middle is Parallels Remote Application Server, which we'll be discussing in more detail in this section. As we can see here, organizations of many sizes and even from different verticals have trusted Parallels software to keep their systems up and running. In fact, we have a strong presence in various verticals in education, in government, in healthcare industries, and we also have close partnerships with the main technology leaders such as Microsoft, Apple, and Intel. And here we have just a geographic representation of all these different organizations here. So focusing on Parallels Remote Application Server, and also with a closer look at one of the later versions, that's version 16. So what is Remote Application Server? So in a nutshell, Remote Application Server is an application and desktop delivery solution that allows end users to access their virtual applications and desktops. So in reality, these resources are hosted on Microsoft terminal servers, remote desktop session hosts, and also on VDIs, on Windows desktop operating systems running on any hypervisor, such as Microsoft Hyper-V, VMware ESX, vCenter, Citrix Zen Server, KVM, and even Nutanix Acropolis. Users access these resources from any device. And that's a key point here, because we have many customers looking at centralization of management, but also in terms of flexibility, in terms of universal access. In fact, Parallels provides native clients, Parallels clients for both PC and non-PC platforms. So we talk about Windows, we talk about OS X, we talk about iOS, Linux, Raspberry Pi, we talk about Android. We talk about Chromebooks, for example, quite popular in the education sector. In terms of backend deployment, Remote Application Server can be deployed on-prem, on private clouds, in hybrid and public clouds. So here we're seeing that flexibility on both the end users' devices and also at the backend infrastructure. In fact, as we're seeing here as well, in terms of backend, we also have ability to be implemented in hyper-converged solutions as well, such as Nutanix, Acropolis, and HPE. So how are we helping businesses today? Very important when we talk about such technologies. The first thing that comes to mind is with regards to security. And obviously, apart from having all the data and applications in the data center, so that is in a way creating that security, minimizing or mitigating any data leaks or data integrity issues. Remote application server also comes with added security in terms of granular filtering, for example. So to whom are you going to provide access to these resources? And we talk about not just, for example, a user or a security group, a group of users, but also maybe depending on the device that they're using, depending on the location as well. Apart from that, all traffic is tunneled, is wrapped in 443 in SSL. So in terms of security, it's very important to, although we're allowing that mobility, that flexibility, security is still number one in terms of added value here. In terms of deployment, it's very important that when we talk about application, desktop delivery, we try to keep things as simple as possible. And in fact, as we're going to see as well from the technical demo, we provide access via a single console for the IT administrators to set up, to configure, and to maintain. So in terms of deployment, it's very easy to deploy and able to have all the main infrastructure capabilities, even in terms of load balancing, in terms of reporting, all included out of the box as well. So that is important to get the setup up and running. And we understand that because when we talk about digital transformation and having ability to be as flexible as possible, that is important, to have such a flexible solution. However, it wouldn't be successful if users' experience is poor. In fact, we focus a lot on users' experience by having users' ability to access from any device and even from HTML5 browser. So in reality, even if we talk about, for instance, bring your own device or choose your own device, users can access these resources even without having anything installed on that device. So obviously, in terms of maintaining that client on the device, that is not needed if we allow, for example, users to access any HTML5 compatible browser to access these resources. Apart from that, when we talk about brilliant users experience, we also we intend to talk about mobile users as well. Users using Android or iOS to access these resources. And on those particular devices, PARS provides also proprietary features, functionality that make usage on small screen factor devices even better, making the user feel that that application was actually designed for mobile device usage. So there are specific features apart from the native features like pinch, zoom, swipe, but specific features like the magnifying glass or even quick keypads. So we're able to create shortcuts on these applications, and we're going to see that as well in the demo. Being a cloud-ready solution, we have the ability to be, as I mentioned, deployed on-prem, hybrid, or in the cloud. So even if you are today embracing the cloud, we are currently on marketplaces of AWS and Microsoft Azure. If you are not ready there, we are being used to help organizations to drive to the cloud. It's about that flexibility. It's about not just today, but also tomorrow in terms of delivery of applications and desktops, line of business applications, and any corporate resource. So just to sum up what we discussed, it is an all-inclusive solution. So with the same license, with one license, there are no different variations of this license. We provide the abilities to deliver applications and desktops. When we talk about desktops, we talk about those session-based desktops from remote desktop session hosts or VM-based desktops, so that through VDI, running on Windows XP SP3 up till Windows 10. High availability and load balancing are very crucial even in today's environment. No matter of the size of the organization, we want that level of uptime. And in fact, the main infrastructure components are all active, highly available. Also, load balancing technology is included in the same license. when users are accessing these from different devices, it's very important for the user to have the perception that that application or desktop is actually installed on the device. So it wouldn't be the case if we do not integrate with the local devices. In fact, we provide, for example, universal printing and universal scanning drivers, so we have the ability to redirect those, and the user would feel that that application is actually running on that particular device. Apart from that, other peripheral redirection, we talk about USB redirection, drive redirection, so users can access their local drives, so on and so forth. And this would not fall under the umbrella of simplicity if there's no certain level of automation. So in terms of deployment, in terms of configuration, it's wizard-based configuration. We provide various templates as well, and all the functionality that we're going to see today being carried out from the console in a GUI can also be carried out from PowerShell, due to the PowerShell API that we provide. So in essence, if you're an ISV, for instance, and you're adding a new tenant, that can all be scripted. And once you onboard new tenants, you can run the script and obviously have a full, complete parallel remote application server setup. As we mentioned, in terms of clients, these are all the platforms that Parallels provide clients for, native clients that can be installed on the devices. So in the respective marketplaces, we can send email invitations. So we'll invite the users to access this setup that you will be maintaining, for instance, okay, with the right client, with the right Parallels client, depending from where the end user is accessing that particular deployment. And these are all the devices that we talked about. So we talked about Android and iOS, iPhone, iPad, Linux. Actually, there we're looking at the Raspberry Pi as well, Windows, MacBooks, Chromebooks, and even, as we mentioned, from HTML5 browser. That flexibility is also extended at the back end. It's very important even to keep delivering that lower TCO. Ability to publish applications desktop from RDSH, supporting, when we talk about VDIs, to support the hypervisors that we are seeing here in front of us, along with KVM and Nutanix Acropolis. In terms of flexibility also, in publishing applications on desktop from different OSs, that is also very important. So in the same site, we support heterogeneous deployment. So in reality, you could have various different Windows Server operating systems or Windows Desktop operating systems. Okay, so for example, running even from Windows Server 2003 SP1 up to Windows 2016. Maybe you want to cater for a legacy application along with a new application. This would be transparent for the user because the users would log on to their own app store, like, if you may. Okay, so that is that flexibility in terms of Windows servers or Windows desktops. If we talk about VDIs or remote PCs, again, from Windows XP up to Windows 10, and even in terms of deployment, running on-prem, hybrid, which could be a way forward pointing to the cloud or even full cloud deployments. So the key benefits that we are looking at is definitely in terms of automation. We want to make this as effortless as possible to configure and to maintain day to day. We do not want to have IT administrators firefighting, but rather, allowing the IT team to focus on the IT strategy or even the corporate strategy to embark on new technologies, making users' productivity increase, while obviously allowing users to access these resources, these important resources for their organization as efficiently as possible. That takes us to the service availability. As we mentioned, because the ability of having redundancy within the Parallels remote application server components themselves with active passive or active deployments, we can reduce that downtime. But it does not come at a cost as well, because as we mentioned, all these functionalities are included in the same license as well. So in terms of load balancing, We provide also a virtual load balancer to load balance the front-end traffic, while also at the back-end included out of the box, we load balance different users to different terminal servers depending on the user's sessions, depending on the memory or CPU consumption on the terminal servers. So that will make sure, obviously, that we're providing that user's experience, and allowing, providing access for that user to the right server at the right time. And that takes us to the user's experience speed that we mentioned as well before. So when we talk about printing, literally printing is from any device. So if you do have the RAS client installed, or even HTML5 printing is allowed. So when you have that printer installed on that local device, we can redirect that printer, or even if we're printing from HTML5, we can print from the web as well. So we are obviously using those native, we talk about mobile devices using those native functionality, but also providing unique experiences on top of those. And in terms of security, apart from what I mentioned before of the advanced filtering, so we're providing access not just for the user or group, but also maybe depending on the device, depending on the MAC address, depending on the location, based on a gateway, for example, which is the front-facing component, as we're going to see in the demo. There's also that SSL encryption that we talked about. There's also the ability to point to a two-factor authentication service. So we support the DeepNet, SafeNet, and Radius. So if you do have a Radius server, you can easily point the remote application server from the console itself to the FA server. And again, you can choose here to who you're going to provide second-level authentication to. Maybe from a certain location, for a certain office, you do not require second-level authentication, but a different department or different offices, maybe for users that are accessing this from home or from internet cafes, you want to provide that at that level of security. In terms of authentication as well, part of the security piece, authentication can be done via username or password, but as well via smart card for Windows and Linux users as well. So quickly looking at the later significantly new features here on version 16. Version 16 was a version that was available back in July, but last week, actually, Parallels have also introduced version 16.1, which includes also this functionality and even more. So the latest addition to Remote Application Server is the integration with Turbo.NET. So Turbo.NET provides that application provisioning and containerization. So within the console, we have APIs that communicate with Turbo.NET public repository, and in a couple of clicks, you can actually stream an application that is available in Turbo.NET public repository and publish that to the users. Maybe you want to have different versions of the same. Let's take an example, Internet Explorer. Okay, so in the past, if you wanted to have different versions of IE, you needed to have different servers to host that. But now, because we have the ability to containerize that application, so in reality we're creating a bubble around that application, okay, we have the ability to run multiple instances of different applications that under normal circumstances would not be able to run simultaneously next to each other. This also applies for any application that is not available to run in a multi-user environment, while now, because of containerization, we can. So the integration with Turbo.NET is also included in version 16. HTML5 customizations, and it's very important as well, especially for service providers like yourselves, where you have the ability to utilize different customizations on the landing page where the users will log on to access their resources, giving you ability to personalize the URLs, the themes, the colors, backgrounds, foregrounds, creating log on and log off messages, and also restricting users based on there may be user groups within the AD to provide access to this particular landing page that you're providing to your users. On the mobile clients part, the quick keypads is something that was added in version 16 as well. So the quick keypads give you that ability to include create shortcuts. So what do we mean? If you do have, for example, a physical keyboard in front of you, it's easy if you're accessing an application to carry out shortcuts. So basic shortcuts, for example, Control P for print, Control S for save, Control F for find, for instance, right? But maybe if you are accessing that application on a small screen mobile device, maybe these shortcuts are not that easy to carry out. In that way, we can create a label, what we call a label. So we call that print, for instance, and that would be associated with a shortcut. The user, when the user accesses this application from an iOS or an Android device, they have the ability to click on that particular button. It's a virtual button, so it's like post-injecting of code of that application, so that where the users are able to carry out those shortcuts. So we talk about not just Office applications, obviously, but maybe in-house applications that require certain shortcuts, ERP applications, so on and so forth. Have the ability as well to use Swift Point Mouse on iOS, so the users are used to go on with their iPads, for instance, but want also that mouse experience. We support Swift Point Mouse. So again, we're translating that device, that tablet, into a full-fledged workstation, along with added security in terms of passcode and Touch ID that provides that security when users open that Parallels client on the mobile devices. The PowerShell integration was not from version 16, but we keep on adding different modules here, so that will allow even more automation. And now we're at a stage that you are able to set up a complete farm, deploy servers, choose what applications to publish, add filtering. So again, to whom are you going to provide access to, activate the license, for all in an automated manner. Other security improvements include ability to control everything from the user's experience to drive redirection, print redirection, scanning. Anything can be controlled centrally via remote application server policies. Okay, we have the ability as well on the client manager, which is quite a unique functionality, where you are able also to manage not just the end user sessions, but also the Windows devices that are being used from the users to connect to these resources. And we have added there also the ability to log these devices and even carry out more device layer security settings, such as, for example, disabling USB ports, for example, or disabling print screen, or even replacing the entire desktop of that end device. So we have the ability to translate that rich client into a thin client as well. Now, to see all these functions in action, what I would suggest is also to go through a quick demo together. So here I actually have a deployment, and this actually is running on Azure. In West Europe, there's a small deployment of 2 servers. However, as we mentioned, these 2 servers are hosting all the main roles, and since they're all active, I can say that I have a full HA setup with just running on 2 Windows servers. This is the remote application server console, if you are not familiar with it, and as we mentioned as well, this console is used to both configure and maintain. In the designer page here, we're able to see what builds remote application server. So a quick overview, what we're looking at is remote clients or local clients hitting those gateways. Now the gateways are Parallels software installed on Windows servers. Here we also have the HTML5 node. So we have the gateway itself is providing the HTML5 capabilities. And then traffic is forwarded to the publishing agents. So here we're talking about where the configuration is kept. This is the brains of the solution, because from here we actually load balance different users, as we mentioned, to different terminal servers. And that's based on not just round robin, but also based on resources on the terminal servers. So we take account user sessions, number of user sessions, that is memory and CPU consumption. Okay, so making sure that there's no user experience degradation simply because of lack of resources. Now, how easy it is to add terminal servers, remote desktop session hosts. In this example, I have 2 terminal servers already, both in active-active, and to add more, I simply centrally deploy an agent onto these servers. Again, the servers can range from Windows from Windows 2003 SP1 up to Windows 2016, and they can run in the same group here. We have the ability to add the firewall rules, automatically install the Microsoft RDS role automatically and centrally from here, enable desktop experience, add users, giving them the ability and access to be part of the remote desktop users group. So at this point, I can obviously already publish applications and desktops, and this is the most widely used setup. Okay. However, apart from that, we also provide ability to also set up VDIs. So this is VM-based VDI. So in reality, we deploy an agent to the main hypervisors that we support, and these are all the hypervisors listed here. We deploy an agent on these hypervisors, and we have the ability to see all the running guests. So we create a template from any of these guests. From that template, we can create other virtual machines that will be used to provide users their desktop or their application as well. And here we can utilize the full clone technology or even linked clones technology to create clones from this particular template. Other agents that we provide include remote PC agents. So if you do have a workstation at the office and you want to provide access to that, you can also do that by deploying an agent to it, even if it's a physical machine. The gateways, as I mentioned, the front-facing component, everything is quite at your reach here. As you can see, it's a very simple deployment with its own IP here. We allow AAT and 443 for security measures. You can disable AAT from the untrusted and allow only 443, or you can even redirect AAT trees access. Can create a certificate, generate a new certificate or SCSR, a certificate request to be signed by SCA, and also on the gateways you have that HTML5 capabilities. So out of the box you'll instantly have that URL that you can distribute to your users where they can access the applications available or desktops available, any resource of that matter, from anywhere on any device. By default, users are expected to use either the Parallels client, so that portal is able to distribute the client, so there's a client detection, and we're going to see that in a bit as well, or fall back to HTML5. For instance, you can obviously force one or the other. Okay. Publishing agents, as we said, these are the brokers, active, and we do not require additional SQL HA for an HA deployment as well. And finally, here are the HALB. So these are what you call HALB, stands for High Availability Load Balancer, which allows load balancing from the clients to the secure client gateways. So in reality, this would sit over here. Obviously, we can integrate with third-party load balancers if you do have maybe invested already in physical load balancers, and that load balancer would need to load balance traffic to the one gateway and the other gateway, for making the gateway highly available, okay, and the load balance the traffic onto them. An interesting theme here, with an interesting feature here, especially for service provider, is the team. So on the same gateways, we can create teams. So by default, when users log on, this would be the standard logon page, with that logo, these colors, so on and so forth. However, you can create different URLs for representing maybe different customers. Okay, and here I can show these teams accordingly, right? So I can create a particular team, I can change the appearance as I wanted, and before that, before I apply, I can then review this myself as an administrator after changing the logos, messages, language, bar, adding URL, so on and so forth. So you customize that portal accordingly. So in terms of publishing, we already have some published resources over here. It's very easy to do, all wizard driven. So you can choose to publish an application, publish a containerized application, as we talked about, at desktop. So that's a complete session-based desktop or VDI or a desktop from a remote PC or any Windows resource, documents, internet sites, folders, so on and so forth. So if we go on and publish just an application, I can choose from a terminal server in this particular example. I can also choose to run applications maybe already installed on my server. So in this case, let me choose a particular server. We'll do a software inventory on that particular server. So these are the applications that I've already installed, and I can easily publish one or multiple applications at the same time. And that's it. So in a matter of some clicks, I already published these 2 applications. Then it's time for me to choose to whom I want to provide this application. It's very easy, to set up based on users. So I can choose a particular user and give access to that application. Maybe because we have different tenants, you're segregating the tenants based on different security groups. So you can add that security group here, or even mix and match, add with different filtering types. As we mentioned, based on that device, based on location, gateway, IP address, so on and so forth. So let us look quickly at the user's experience side. So if I minimize here, you're seeing here my Windows 10, and also I have Parallels client for Windows installed on this particular device. So here as a user, I can simply log on to my setup, okay, and run any application that was made available for me. So in this case, I just launched WordPad, for example, okay. That is running on this particular, that's actually the compute, it's actually running on the terminal servers. Okay, so my terminal servers, as I mentioned, are running on Azure, but the users would have that perception that it's actually running locally. And obviously you can create shortcuts on desktops, so these would also integrate more with the underlying operating system. These can also be done, be available as well, in the start menu. Okay, so that's one method of access using the Parallels client, and as we said, any client on any platform. So I have also here a non-Windows client. So imagine this is a thin client, this is an Ubuntu machine, it's Linux based. I again have the client installed with the same user, password, same credential. I can access what is made available for this user. Now in this particular case, I want to publish, for example, I want to gain access to an entire desktop. So this is a session-based desktop, and just like that, I have translated that rich client, that Linux client, into a full-fledged workstation as well. Another method of access is using the HTML5 browser capabilities. So again, I logged on to my Azure deployment. If I refresh, actually, you're able to see my newly published resources. And as a user, I can go ahead and access these resources either from the client, as we've already seen, or from the HTML5. So like this, I don't even need to have that client installed. As you're seeing, this particular desktop is running in the browser itself. Okay, I can also upload to it, download, put on shortcuts here, and also use remote clipboard. I can also put this in full screen mode. So like this, I have a full session-based desktop running in full screen mode. This is all on WAN, and as you can see, without even the client, the user's experience is still very fluid. That's because we are using those remote effects capabilities as well. Minimize here. Same thing applies if I want to publish access applications. So I have some applications that were made available here. Office, for instance, this checkout office. If I run this in HTML5, so it will launch this particular instance, Excel 2016, in the browser. So we're creating that session. As you can see here, Excel is running within the browser. If I minimize here, you're able to see that application itself at the bottom part here. So if I run another application, we'll do a session sharing. So this time it opened much faster, right? So even faster than local because we're using session sharing, and I can easily switch in between these applications accordingly. So the scenarios here are quite vast. You know, it's providing applications, desktops, anything that's able to run on the Windows side, access to users running on any device, using any clients, or even without a client, anywhere they are. Okay, and to finalize the last bit of the quick presentation, I mentioned here is the quick keypads part, where you have the ability to create for instance, shortcuts here, and these shortcuts, these labels will be made available when they're accessing their application on iOS and Android. You know, all the categories on the left-hand side, printing, scanning, can be easily accessed from here. Very intuitive, very straightforward, and the main functionalities is all included in the same license under the same console as well. In final point, in terms of information and monitoring, we want IT administrators to understand how the solution is being utilized. And in fact, here we have also added a new category here, monitoring. So this gives us a real-time view of what is actually happening to the system, the number of user sessions we currently have, the CPU usage, free memory, disk usage, network usage, so on and so forth. And this obviously helps in identifying as well, in troubleshooting, identifying any bottlenecks. We look, for example, at login storms, boot up storms, so we'll make sure that the system is operating as it expected. Apart from that, we also provide 14 reports, 14 predefined reports based on users, activities, groups of users, devices used, servers handheld, and application usage. So here I can see, for example, drill down and run any report that I want. For example, I want to run a report to see how much that particular application was used, view report, and I can easily export that to PDF, Excel, or Word for management purposes. Okay, and that quickly brings me to towards the end of this quick overview. Obviously, if you do require further deep dive on the functionality as well in terms of the added security, including device layer management, giving ability to manage the endpoint Windows devices as well, and also putting policies not just on the users when they're creating it, when the users are creating a session, but also on the device layer. Please feel free to reach out to us. I will be passing the mic to Chris again to see if we do have any further queries that we can tackle in this section. The remote application server we saw the IT administration workflow, the day-to-day, any day-to-day management, and also the user's experience, very important. Obviously, for more details, as I mentioned, or if there are any questions, please, we can put them forward. Now we do have 10 to 15 minutes that we can spare for answering any queries here.
Yeah, so there is the questions window within GoToWebinar, so please do feel free to ask within there, or alternatively feel free to use the chat window as well if you've got any particular questions. Obviously, it seems like it was very, very informative, Christian, because I can't see any questions come in just as yet. Please do feel free to ask away if you do have any questions. We are here as a resource for you. Certainly feel free to take advantage while you've got hold of us. If there's any particular questions you might have with regards to the Parallels RAS offering.
Yeah, a typical question, I would say, that usually even from service providers, what will be faced with is in terms of how are we going to, for instance, allow for different tenants in terms of deployment, right? And as we talked about, Chris, remote application server is very flexible in that particular area. Why? Because obviously from the licensing perspective, that there's type of license, the SPLA licenses, but in terms of the deployment itself, technical deployment, remote application server can be set in farms, which include different sites. So if service provider would like complete segregation of tenants, then what we recommend is having completely different farms. However, we can also have multiple sites in the same farm, and maybe different sites would represent different end users. Or else, even in the same site, we can also segregate different customers based on groups of terminal servers. So it always depends on the level of segregation. I'm mentioning this because that's usually a particular question that comes to mind when we talk about service providers in particular.
So is it worth touching on how this is licensed as well?
Yes, I think that would be a good approach. So in terms of licenses, how we do it when we talk about SPLA licenses, you can actually provide one license and this license can be installed on multiple farms. Okay, so what we usually do is we check out the peak usage of each farm monthly. So for example, you have 10 different customers, 10 different farms. Let's start off with complete segregation of farms. Okay, all these farms are licensed based on the same license key. So what we do is check out the peak usage of each farm monthly. We'll aggregate the total amount together. So if you have 10 farms and each farm has, for example, 5 users, okay, so we talk about we're aggregating all those users, so in total 50 users, and you'll be billed accordingly to that. So that part has already been taken care of, and that can all be controlled from the My Account of Parallels. So when you log on to your account, you're able to see the consumption, daily consumption as well, monthly reporting. You can also deactivate a remote license, a remote farm as well from the license account, from the My Account at Parallels.
Great, thank you. It doesn't look like we've got any questions, so you really have been incredibly informative, and they've obviously answered all their questions in advance, so that's great. We'll give it another minute or so just in case any questions pop in. But while doing so, I just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time out to attend this webinar this morning. I'm hoping that you'll find it incredibly informative. As you can see on screen, there's some contact information for ourselves, but if you go to www.greymatter.com, we've got a series of events planned coming up in the short and longer term future. So if this was of particular interest, we do have other webinars coming up and also in-person events as well, dotted all across the UK. So do feel free to take a look and register if any of particular in your interest. Okay, so I suppose there's been no questions, so it's a good point for us to wrap up this morning, or wrap up rather. Thank you all for taking the time out to join us this morning. It's much appreciated. If you do have any questions, please feel free to use the contact information on the screen. But as I said at the beginning, we'll be providing you the recording and also the slide decks in follow-up. And also you'll be reached out to by a member of the Grey Matter team just to get any feedback as well. So again, thank you very much, Christian. Thank you for your time as well this morning. I hope everybody has a fantastic day.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris, and thanks for the attendees for taking time. Have a good day.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.